the first time you're exposed to two wheels is like a big deal, and it happened for me. I remember my bicycle that I was given, and it's a little 3-speed Vista. It was metal flake gold. It was kind of the era of like the sort of the chopper bicycles, and had a sissy bar on it, and ape hangers, and a banana seat, and that whole thing. And I just remember I wasn't quite big enough to ride it, and I remember just kind of staring at it for a few months before I got the guts to kind of like, to actually try to throw a leg over it and ride it. And then that moment that you do, you just realize that you're, sort of your world as you knew it probably consisted of a 1 block radius from my house at that age. And then all of a sudden having this thing that could, you could go to the next city in a couple hours or an hour. That was that was just a mind blower to me, that you could be transported like this. All right, I'm Brad Richards, and I'm the Vice President of Styling and Design at Harley-Davidson. I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, and actually born in Dearborn, just literally about 2 blocks down from Ford Motor Company. My parents were both school teachers. They were in education, and they came up from the South to take advantage of some of the jobs that were available in and around Detroit due to all the manufacturing that was going on at that time. And so we settled in the Dearborn area, and from a pretty early age, I think I was exposed to, vehicles, obviously cars and trucks and motorcycles and things. It's something that at least my mother and father tell me at an early age I was always really, fascinated by anything with wheels that moved. And kind of growing up in Dearborn, it was a very thrilling place to grow up if you were sort of dialed into to those types of things, to those vehicles and just automobiles and transportation and motors and wheels in general. There was a lot of that was going around. That led to, kind of in school, obviously, I should say even before school, I remember getting, and some of these stories obviously are going to sound a little cliched. I'm sure a lot of people sort of had the same exact experience, folks that are interested in in motorcycles and the brand. But, I can remember vividly getting my first bicycle, and it was to this day I can remember it just felt like the constraints and the confines of the neighborhood had been dropped down, and all of a sudden there was a whole other world to kind of go out and explore, which I did with my friends, and we rode around a lot. And that, that eventually led to motorcycles and kind of getting involved with off-road bikes and on-road bikes and mopeds and mini bikes and go-karts. And that was sort of our childhood, that, and I would say a major healthy dose of skateboarding, which was really another sort of factor in my childhood that was that I completely embraced, fell in love with that, and did a lot of skateboarding, still do to this day. So that's another big piece of the puzzle. But again, I think that all kind of centers around movement and freedom and sort of being able to chase the horizon, wherever you're at. The motorcycle thing really came because those were the first vehicles that I was exposed to and could actually, experience myself. I think we had some friends in the neighborhood that had a Ruttman mini bike. God, I just remember it had had a metal flake gold frame and white wheels, and the engine had a really cool decal on it. Ruttman Ugly, I think it was what it was called. And he had put chrome handlebars on it, a little sissy bar. And I just thought, God, this is so cool. It's this, not only does he have this great, he's got a motorcycle, but he's also started to customize it. And I thought that was really cool that people could, express themselves via the vehicles that they chose to ride on and customize. And so that really sort of unlocked something. The other, and I had paper routes. That's the other thing, is the first time I had 2 paper routes at the same time, I realized that my bicycle just wasn't going to cut it anymore in terms of time. My paper routes, I work for the Detroit Free Press, and so it's an early morning paper, and they drop the papers off at 4 a.m., so I would try to get everything done before I went to school. I realized that, a bicycle wasn't going to cut it because I just had too much ground to cover, so I saved up and bought a little moped and put some bags in the back, built like a little rack for the papers and so on, and that enabled me to have multiple paper routes. And I realized, wow, this is really cool. It's this, this kind of the wheels and the motor. Yeah, it's a fun thing to kind of bomb around on a weekend, but it also can provide income and it can make your life sort of a better experience because you're able to do your work quicker and so on. I was so excited about design just in general, even beyond wheels. And I was fascinated by furniture design and, these great companies in Michigan where I grew up, Herman Miller and Knoll, and Knoll's, I think, Pennsylvania, but Herman Miller is certainly Michigan, and Hayworth. And there were these very famous, they were the heroes, the Charles and Ray Ames and Henry Bertoya and some of these furniture designers. To me, they were so punk rock because they were just, they didn't follow they didn't follow the rules of what something should be. They really kind of reinvented it in their own mind's eyes, and they were able to figure out a way to commercialize it and make it so that everybody was able to understand it and then desired it. And I thought that was just so fascinating. And it's kind of the same thing with car designers and motorcycle designers and so on, and just design in general, where people see things a little bit differently and they create something that makes everyone sort of think about something differently. And whether it improves your quality of life or it is just something that's more beautiful to look at or functions better or is, showcases better technology, people want it. And so it's, and it makes people kind of reach into their pocketbooks and plop down their hard-earned money for it. And that to me always fascinated me. There's this desire for new, like the next thing, the next cool thing. So in college, I was, as much as I wanted to be a car designer, I was fascinated in product design. I was fascinated in furniture design. So I got a little bit lost, I think, in my direction. And because I just wanted to be great at all of it. And it was great because the school allowed me to do that, but it diluted my focus. And so that before I graduated, I got a summer internship at a company. Ironically, that company that I hired in at, they also bought another company at that same time that was dealing with automotive design. And they needed someone to run they wanted to start an industrial design department and have this be a place that the big three could go to have like skunkwork design projects happen. And also the same thing for furniture. So it was perfect because I loved all of this stuff. So I was the first designer they hired, and I hired a bunch of my friends from school and put a clay modeling team together and built a studio. And this is all like when I'm like 23. So I didn't 100% know what the heck I was doing, but I had this opportunity and I just jumped on it. And that eventually led to Ford Motor Company, being exposed to Ford Motor Company, and they reached out and offered me a job in their design studio. And that was like, I died and gone to heaven because, I never thought I would be working at Ford Motor Company, this place that I was born right next to. And it was very cool at that time to work at the company. It still is. Like a lot of friends that work there. And so working there, I started working in the truck department and worked my way up fairly quickly and started to be able to lead the design process. And within that experience, I actually was assigned the Harley-Davidson F-150s. And that is how I met Willie G and Louie and Ray Dre and Paul Martin and all these guys that were just total heroes to me because they were the guys that were designing for Harley-Davidson, the coolest, brand on earth. First of all, I couldn't afford a Harley. And I didn't have anybody that was super close to me that was really into Harley-Davidson. A lot of my friends were into dirt bikes, and it was a lot of metric dirt bikes, and so I wanted a bike really badly, but I didn't quite know how to kind of beyond just the functional bikes that I used for my paper routes and stuff. I didn't know what to do next, and fate kind of intervened, and I was in a band in art school, and like many artists are, and we had a rehearsal space that was in downtown Detroit, and it was like it was an old building that had 4 floors, and on the third floor is where this old metal shop was, and that's where the guy that owned the metal shop allowed us to rent out a corner of it so that our drummer could leave his drums there and we could come and practice a few times a week. In the corner of that room, there was a pile of scrap, and big pile of scrap, like 5 or 6 feet off the ground, where for years, whoever had been working in this shop had just thrown bits and pieces. And one day on break from playing, sitting there while everyone's having a beer, and I saw this handlebar and handle grip sticking out of the pile of junk, and I started to uncover it, and I realized there's a motorcycle in here. And And so over the course of a few rehearsals, I started digging deeper, and eventually I found there's this old Boxer BMW that was in horrible shape, but it had been basically disfigured, but it was at the bottom of the pile. And I asked the owner of the building if I could buy it. And he said, I don't even know, I'm not even sure. The metal shop was here when I bought the building. I don't even know who owns it, and there's no title. And he basically said, if you can get it out of here, you can have it. And I said, oh, that's awesome. So we figured out how to get it out of there piece by piece. I did with another friend, and I took it home. And then over the course of maybe a year or two, I think I was just getting out of school, I started to restore it in a very crude way, but I was putting it back together and learning about it. And I finally got it running, and went out for the first time. And I remember I told my friends, my family, especially my mom. She was so freaked out about a motorcycle. I told her that I'm just going to restore it and kind of I'll put it in my apartment just as something to look at. And one day, I had it was done, and I just couldn't. I had to ride it. I restored the whole thing, so I just took it for a ride around the neighborhood, and it started up. It was so incredible, and I remember just that moment just changing everything. I was kind of into cars at the time and other things, and that was the moment that it just became 1,000% motorcycles. I had never experienced that feeling before on any other kind of type of vehicle I'd ever tried to ride or drive in. It was just, and being at Ford, I was exposed to race cars and race trucks and all kinds of high performance stuff, and having some incredible experiences that any gearhead would love to have. And just riding that insanely slow, sluggish, heavy old BMW around the neighborhood was the most thrilling thing. I felt like I was on a rocket ship heading to the moon. It was so cool. There are a couple that stick with me that I still say to the designers. This one really came from Gordon Plato, who is, again, the chief designer. I think he's a director. I think he's a North American director at Ford now, but he again exposed me to the brand probably more so than anybody else, he and Willie, since they were such good friends, and they really kind of brought me along. But he used to say, change is good. As designers, you tend to, especially as a young designer, you tend to do something and you fall in love with it, whether it's a sketch or an idea or the color that you chose for something. And inevitably in a corporation, there's going to be a whole bunch of other people that are not going to align with your idea and want to change it in some way, shape, or form. And that can be very emotionally challenging for a designer to have their design messed with. And so I remember as a designer thinking that when I finished something, it was perfect and did not need to be changed. I don't need a critique because it's perfect. And then of course the first critique you have, it gets torn to pieces and you become very emotionally distraught about it. And Gordo always told me, change is good. Change is good. And don't fall in love with it. Don't fall in love with it. So I think those are the two things that are probably the most valuable things that people have told me that resonate and that I still use with my team as well, is that change is good. And at Harley-Davidson, that's a bit of a challenge because a lot of our design aesthetic, a lot of sort of the trick, if you will, with our products is that they don't evolve, that we evolve them at a pace that, technically they may be completely new under the skin, but aesthetically they look exactly like the Harley we made, 60 years ago. And that, for some products and some customers, that's absolutely the right play, but it's not the right play for every Harley-Davidson. The only thing that's kind of keeping us from seeing Harley-Davidson in some of these new segments and accepting them is sort of the constraints within our own perceptions. And when you kind of blow out those constraints, and you can do that very easily if you're open to it by looking at the history of the company, and you realize that we've done so many radical things, different things, innovative things that people forget about. That innovating like with electric and innovating with these new segments, adventure touring, and this is not unfamiliar territory for us. We've been here before in some shape or form. You can always find some type of tangible narrative that the company has navigated that resonates exactly with the moment that we're in. And I mean this. I mean, if you are distraught about a moment that we're having with the company as an employee or as a customer, spend an hour walking through the museum and you will find 15 other products that came from moments just like the one we're having right now. I mean, it's crazy how it's sort of all been done before. Now it's just up to us to put the right spin on it with, whatever the issue is that you're working with. But I know there's a lot of angst out there in the world right now, just about sort of unprecedented times that we're all experiencing right now, as not just as a company, but as a society, a global society. And but just thinking about the corporate side of things and the brand, specifically Harley-Davidson, I mentioned this in my talk that there have been moments in our history, whether it's world wars or recessions or depressions or cultural revolutions, where the company has really taken some hits and kind of barely scraped by and looked like things were going to get pretty dire. And in all of these events, almost to each one, when these things happen, the company has this incredible rehabilitating, this sort of sense of, not sense, but this innate sort of DNA that helps reinvent itself during these times. And I think this situation is going to be the exact same thing for Harley-Davidson. I think that it is going to, the way that we get through this and the way we come out on the other side will define the company for generations. And just like it did for those that went through world wars and those that went through the cultural revolutions and those that went through the depressions and the recessions. And the company has a great way of just reinventing itself on the other side of these things. And these are great moments for us to pause as a company, and we really begin to learn what's important and what's not in terms of the culture of the company, the people that work within it, why we care about the brand so much, why we love motorcycling so much, and why motorcycling matters so much. And I think being constrained inside our homes and for a moment suddenly being immobile has all given us a desire to get out and become mobile once again, and maybe break free from the digital interfaces that we all use every day and go experience real things out there in the world. And man, there's just no way, I can't think of a better way to experience really living and real experience than behind the handlebars of a Harley-Davidson. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity for the company on the other side of this. And I think it's really important for us all to think about that and poise the company, whether it's a dealership or employee or somebody in a manufacturing facility, but just thinking about how we need to make sure that we're poised to take advantage of that on the other side of this, which we will get to the other side of this. I think that, again, we get stuck into our own perceptions of what something should be and what something shouldn't be. Most recently with Harley-Davidson, we think about the incredibly successful years, early 90s through probably 2006 or 7, where a certain style of motorcycle was the absolute right product for the moment. And that's the stuff that worked, and that's the stuff that really accelerated the performance and the success of the company. But we're in a new moment now, and so we need to think about the brand differently. And again, I go back to the narrative of the past where we have explored all of these things. I think if you stick to the right design tenets, which we do, look, sound, and feel, and it's basically, that's talking about the DNA of a characterful experience. We are the motor company, so you celebrate the powertrain. You celebrate the mechanicalness of a Harley-Davidson. You don't cover it up. You expose it. And it's something about being honest and transparent and not, there's something, that's, I think, cognitively happening with when someone looks at one of our bikes and we approach it in such an honest, authentic way, what it says about not just the company, but the people within the company and what the company stands for. That's absolutely true in my mind. And so I think that if you think about any product through that filter, there are a lot of places we can take the brand. And I think we're just beginning to show folks where what we're capable of doing.